Hi. My question dovetails pretty nicely with that, I think, which is that for me, I think the most resonant criticisms of UBI have revolved around the spiritual and psychological value of work to an individual. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts on that are and why you propose UBI versus, say, just a large jobs program with the same amount of money.
Yeah. So to me, work is central. And the great thing about UBI is that it would create over 2 million jobs in these communities. And the example that I use is that if you can imagine a town in Missouri with 50,000 people, and right now there's someone in that town that wants to start a bakery, but the bakery is a dumb idea. But then I become president, and now there's another $50 million in spending power every month in that town, and then the bakery might become a good idea. And then that person starts a bakery, and then they say, hey, I need to hire a morning shift baker. And then you end up hiring people for accessible jobs in that community. And that's only possible because you're supercharging the local economy and helping restore vitality to those Main Street retailers. So this isn't the easiest way is to say hey, what are the jobs that that community is going to value and support? Then people will do those jobs because work is central. The biggest misconception about UBI is that it's somehow anti-work or mitigates work. It's pro-work. It's pro-work in terms of just creating jobs in those communities that people actually want to do and can access. It's also pro-work in terms of the moms and caregivers and nurturers, because we know that's work too. It's just our market doesn't value it as that. So that's the big, and that's at least starting to push us in the direction of meaning. How many of you all are entrepreneurs? So if you're an entrepreneur, you know what I'm talking about here, where it's you're doing something primarily because it's important to you. Yes, there's money involved. Yes, it might seem like a good economic opportunity, but you're driven by the fact that you think that that form of work is the highest form of work you can be doing at this point. And so if you put more Americans in that position, then that ends up being this incredible journey of self-discovery. Because what proportion of Americans right now do you think are doing the job that they really want to be doing? So you said 20%. It's you said 25, 5, 30. I'm happy to say it's around 30, but that still means there's this incredible gulf in terms of our potential energy and value. So one of the joys about this is that you're going to end up creating tens, hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs, and then people will be able to define their own meaning. I think a federal jobs guarantee program is well intended, but would be somewhere between problematic and disastrous in practice. Just if you imagine a world where it's hey, there's no job for you, you're going to die of starvation, but don't worry, we've got this government job for you. And then you show up, and then let's say it's you don't like the job, you don't like your boss, that there are some problems. It's well, you don't have a choice because this is your only means of survival. And so then you wind up with this bureaucracy doling out subsistence jobs that are necessary for people to survive. And then you have people get politically activated around this is a sure path to dystopia. And unfortunately, that seems to be the direction we're trending. So I love the spirit of a federal jobs guarantee. If we could all magically have jobs that worked out and that we liked and that helped make the earth more sustainable, that would be great. But in practice, that stuff is going to be very, very difficult and expensive and cumbersome and give rise to a whole new army of bureaucrats who measure our performance.
So again, I just want to say it's not a government program and that every dollar goes into the hands of an American citizen. It's a true dividend, where if you were a company and you said, hey, we're declaring a dividend, we're giving this money to shareholders, then everyone would say that's great management. In this case, we, the citizens of this country, are the owners, and if the dividend comes to us, then it's not a government program. It's simply the shareholders of society receiving some of the vast wealth of the society. So it's not a government program. It's actually extraordinarily inexpensive to administer, because if it's truly universal, you don't have case managers or people trying to figure out how much money you make. All of that stuff goes away.
But at least in the short term, the funding would have to come.
Right. So it's actually much more affordable than most people think. So the headline number is about $2 trillion. Our economy is about 19 trillion, so that seems like a lot. But if you dig into the numbers, you find that we're spending about $500 billion right now on income support in various ways, in-kind, food stamps, welfare, housing, Social Security disability. And this would be overlapping. So if someone's receiving, let's say, $700 in benefits right now, then you go to them and say, hey, you can keep your current benefits, or you can go to the Freedom Dividend and get $1,000 a month free and
So
clear.
they would have the option.
They would have the option, but because we're already spending $500 billion, this thing is 25% paid for before you even get started.
Because you wouldn't be able to have both. You wouldn't
Yeah,
be
no, I
able
mean
to
that-
have Medicare. I mean, that was one of my questions, is what it would do to other governmental assistance programs.
Yes. So I believe that we need to transition to a Medicare for All program, because healthcare is one of the major stressors and costs for both American families and individuals, but also businesses. And it's 18% of the economy. It's not giving us proper value, because it's not like our healthcare outcomes are twice as good as other countries, even though we're spending twice as much. But my proposal to pay for universal basic income does not touch Medicaid, Medicare. The $500 billion I described does not include those programs.
Social Security.
So it includes Social Security disability, which is
Okay.
when individuals are receiving income support. So the big problem we're facing as a society is that more and more work is being done by machines, robots, AI, software. And income tax is a terribly inefficient way of actually harvesting that value for the public. So if you look at it, who are going to be the beneficiaries of this transition to automation? It's going to be large tech companies who are excellent at not paying a lot of tax. because
Very
they'll
good
just-
at offshore
yeah,
tax
they'll just
havens.
move it over and say it all went through Ireland. Small tech companies, which are often not profitable, and then if they do get acquired, it's maybe a one-time thing, and they might have to pay on an acquisition at a certain point, but even then it's at a capital gains rate. So there's just not a lot of money that's going to be coming to the public, even as more and more work is going to be done by robots and software. So that's what we need to change, and that's the way we pay for universal basic income. The way we pay for it is we implement a value-added tax, which right now is in practice in every other industrialized country in the world, except for us. And through a value-added tax then, so Amazon, now it's 43% of e-commerce, largest market cap. Jeff Bezos could be the first trillionaire. But there are periods when they said, hey, we didn't even make any money this quarter, so no income tax. Whereas a value-added tax, then they pay based on transaction, and that's inescapable. That's one reason why other countries use it, is that it's a much, much more effective way to get revenue. And so if you're a self-driving truck company, you might not have many humans making money, and so there's not much income tax coming, but a value-added tax, then we get our fair share. And a value-added tax would generate between $700 and $800 billion if we were to implement it at half the European level. The European average VAT is 20%. Our economy is so vast that if we had a VAT of 10%, it would generate $700 to $800 billion. So that is my primary mechanism to pay for the universal basic income, because you have $500 billion plus $800 billion in the VAT. So then you're at about 65% of the $2 trillion. And then the remainder, this is the beauty of universal basic income. We are already spending hundreds of billions on healthcare, incarceration, homelessness, all of these services for people that are falling through the cracks, that those expenses would go down if these people are able to stay out of the emergency room.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because the Peterson Institute, I was looking at some of their research. Apparently in the 70s in Manitoba, Canada, I feel like there was an experiment done with several thousand people that looked at universal basic income. So there is some empirical evidence
Yes.
of what happens, right? And I found it interesting that once a universal income was provided, there were better outcomes when it came to things like health
Yes.
and education.
Yeah, so
What's happening there?
and this is the most powerful stuff of universal basic income, is that it's very human. So Mincom, in that Canadian town you're describing, what they found was that hospital visits went down 9%. They found that domestic violence went down, mental health went up, and children stayed in school longer. In another study in North Carolina, they actually found that children's personalities changed to become more conscientious and agreeable, which are both very positive traits for academic and professional success. So this is what we're talking about at the human level. And so if you can imagine, right now, you know what's really, really expensive? Dysfunction. People coming to the emergency room and then having massive problems that we as a society end up paying for in various ways. Functionality is actually much less expensive. So we're going to get hundreds of billions back from things we're currently spending on healthcare and incarceration and homelessness. And then as the economy grows, because we're putting money in the hands of American consumers, we get 25% of the growth back, because that's the ratio of revenue to GDP growth in the US. So with a VAT of 10%, you essentially pay for $1,000 a month per American adult in perpetuity.